So we'll begin in a minute or two. We are just trying to settle the seating. It's great to see a full hall, over full hall. But little bit of adjustment will have to be made because of the range of both speakers and why the memorial lecture. There's a range of ages. So we do hope that some younger people will make some room as older people come in. And there is space in the library where off screens people can see. The library is in one floor up. And so those who are coming in will go there. But some older people who come here, we will make space for, and we'll try and do that. In the meanwhile, Sandhya, are we ready to start? So Nachiket, please come.
So very good evening to all of you, and thank you all for being here today. I am Nachiket from the School for Democracy. I'll begin by inviting the speakers on stage. So Major General Anil Verma and Professor Trilochan Sastry. If we can put our hands together to invite them on stage, and I call upon Aruna ji to greet them onto the stage with a dushala. Professor Sastry and Major General Anil Verma. BIC has very graciously offered us the premises for today's program. So I invite Sandhya from BIC to briefly tell us about the Bangalore International Centre.
Hello everyone, good evening and welcome to Bangalore International Centre. Most of you already know about us, but for those of you whose first time it is here today, BIC is an inclusive and neutral platform for informed conversation, exchange of ideas, arts and culture. We do about 500 events a year, all of which are free and open to the public, which cover the ambit of arts, culture, performing arts, conversations and screenings. Today, we're incredibly happy to collaborate with the School for Democracy on this 5th Dey Memorial Lecture. Before I let the rest of the programming go on, a humble request to all of you to either switch off your mobile phones or put them on silent. For those of you who are standing at the back, as previously mentioned, there is a simulcast that's happening in the library on the 2nd floor. It's a long lecture, so I request you not to stand here and please go up to the 2nd floor. There's plenty of seats there. And back to Nachiket. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Sandhya. Today's event is in memory of Air Marshal P.K. Dey. Air Marshal Anil Khosla, retired, is with us today and a part of the Dey family. I request him to introduce Air Marshal P.K. Dey and the Dey family.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Air Marshal Anil Khosla. I retired from the Indian Air Force 5 years back. And as Nachiket said, I'm part of the Dey family. I'm the outlaw, I mean son-in-law. Thanks a lot for sparing your valuable time and being with us. It's a very important event for us. We have we got mixed emotions today. And Baba, as we used to call him, he was a legend. He was self-made legend. They say that legends are not born, they are made, but he was a self-made. And we used to, actually, once the grandchildren were born, all of us started calling him Dadu, lovingly. And his friend circle, he was known as Babi. And he 40 years in the Indian Air Force, he's done it all and everything. So we are with very, very mixed emotions today. We are feeling on one hand very proud and remembering him and also missing him. Mrs. Dey is here, Mrs. Asha Dey, for 50 plus years of companionship with Marshal Dey. And 40 years, she was looking after the families, the welfare of the Indian Air Force family, all the personnel. He retired as CNC, Southwestern Air Command, Indian Air Force, based in Jodhpur at that time. And Mrs. Dey was very active in the Indian Air Force, looking after the welfare of all the families. And besides that, outside she worked with, in Bangalore, school for, SKID, that is your, with special children. She's done a lot of work with them. She had no sign language, she learned Braille, and she used to teach in the school, Sheila Kotawala Institute for hearing impaired. I don't like them calling deaf, I think hearing impaired is a better word. And she's done a lot in her life. And she's still more active than all of us. Nikhil is here. Nikhil, can you show your face? Everyone knows Nikhil. He's dedicated his life for the social cause. And with Aruna Roy, we are lucky that Aruna Roy is also with us. And both of them are pioneers of the right to information. And they are associated with Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan as well as School for Democracy. And they are nomadic tribe. They don't stay in one place for more than 2 or 3 days, I think. But amazing work they're done, and doing rather. Deepshika, my wife, she's following in her mother's footsteps, 40 years in the Air Force looking after the people, and now she's secretary in the school, Sheila Kotawala Institute. And 3 grandchildren, Adir, Pranav and Aditi. Aditi is a granddaughter-in-law. So they're also here. We are, very much feeling very, very emotional about today's this thing. And Air Marshal Dey was much more than father-in-law to me. He was a role model for me. And in Indian Air Force, I came across many situations, very tricky situations where decisions had to be required, hard decisions required. When I used to get stumped, I used to sit back and think, how would Baba would have handled the situation? And the answer would stare in my face. So that kind of things I learned from him. A few words about him. He was, as I said, legend in himself. It was not his appointment that he retired as AOC INC or 40 years in the Air Force. It is the leadership qualities which he displayed, the good human qualities which he displayed that he was remembered, and he is very fondly remembered by everyone. He was born in 1934, did his schooling from RIMC, joined Air Force very young. And let me tell you, he was one of the youngest pilots to be commissioned in the Indian Air Force, less than 20 years, 19 years and 10 odd months. And he was one of the youngest to become test pilot at age less than 24 years as a flying officer, when most of us are just finding our feet in the Indian Air Force. Commendable. And he was awarded with 2 presidential awards, and the first one he got as a wing commander, once again as the youngest person to, I think, get a presidential award in the Indian Air Force. As the pilots, the dream is to fly as many types of aircraft. He flew more than 60 types of aircraft. I mean, any pilot would have it will be a dream come true to fly so many aircraft. He worked with HAL, he worked with AST, he worked with a lot of projects which are indigenous, HF-24, NATS, he was fully associated with it. AST, he's worked in AST in every rank. He commanded that institution. AST is the aircraft system testing establishment here in Bangalore. And he commanded twice, once as Air Commodore 1-star rank and once as Air Vice Marshal 2-star rank. And he's done it all, he's seen it all. He's been to UK for his test pilots this thing. He went to USA as an air attaché representing India, 2 presidential awards. I mean, he's done it all. And not only that, as I said, he was admired for by everyone, by his subordinates, by his peers, by his seniors. The subordinates looked up to him for his leadership qualities. And, he had a very good quality, which I picked up from him. He used to delegate work. And then give full freedom, have full faith in the subordinates to do that work, not keep riding, not keep looking over the shoulders. That is what the subordinates used to look up to him for. The peers, they loved him because of his fun-loving nature, very tolerant nature. He had very strong beliefs and views, but he never imposed on anyone. He used to be tolerant to everyone's views and beliefs and to honor them. The seniors admired him for his frank, candid, and unbiased opinions about everything. That's what they used to look up to him for. So I picked up few things from him. Humility, keep your head on the shoulder and feet on the ground. Very humble person after so many achievements. Delegation, as I said. Then he was very, very aware. He used to read a lot. He used to know what is going on regionally, world, globally, nationally. Very, very aware person. Decision making, he was very good at decision making. He never procrastinated. Whenever you go to his office, everyone used to tell me, even I used to, when I was young in Air Force, once or twice I went to his office, his table used to be absolutely bare. No files, no nothing. He had a book or a magazine in hand, always reading. So everyone used to ask, how come you managed to keep your desk clean? He used to do the job. As soon as the file came, he used to do the job and clear it. He never procrastinated. That is what good thing. And he always believed in work hard and play even harder. And that is what I really picked up from him. Post-retirement, he was involved with Cheshire Home for 10 years and give back time to the society. And he was very, very aware. He had very clear thoughts and views about all the happenings which are happening in national, global level, national level. And he was vociferous about his opinions, but never, as I said, never imposed this thing on anyone. He led by example. That is why this topic of transparency and accountability. He followed transparency and accountability in all his appointments, wherever he went, even in the Air Force. And he was very straightforward person. He used to believe that the leader is like a, living in a glass house where everyone can see him. So you have to lead by example. So whatever you say, you have to do it. So this topic today is transparency and accountability, and the challenges and threats which are to the institutions of democracy is a very, very apt considering the personality of Air Marshal Dey. And we have two very prominent, eminent speakers, and I won't steal the thunder from them. And they will be dwelling on various issues related to the four pillars of democracy, that is executive, legislature, judiciary, and more important is the media, which is going, I think, at a tangent a little bit. And then we have the most important independent constitutional bodies like Supreme Court, Election Commission, CAG, RBI, who are supposed to uphold the values of, uphold the democratic values. Are they really doing it? Or are they also facing few issues or going at a tangent? Then we have autonomous bodies like Nikhil and Aruna Dey, which they're doing a wonderful job as a, the institutions, that is the civil society, and upholding the democratic values and doing a wonderful job. So all these issues. Then you have defense services. Are they being politicized? That topic, I think we'll leave it for some other day because I don't want to take too much of time. So challenges and threats, I think we'll be talking about political interference, controlling these institutions which are supposed to work autonomously and uphold the true democratic values. Are they being throttled? Are they being misused? The power has it being misused? Or is the corruption still taking over all these issues and not letting them work? So these are the issues I think we need to dwell upon. And my personal view, last 1 minute, my personal view is that I think we are still prisoners of colonial mindset, all of us. That is my personal view. That is a problem, I think, with the Indian democracy is at the moment. The political and the executive, both, instead of thinking them as service providers, they think they are the rulers. That is the problem. And all of us, I think, fall into the trap and encourage them into this mindset. So if we all change our mindset into being service providers rather than rulers, I think most of the problems will get sorted out. With that, I think I will stop and I'll let the eminent speakers take over and to talk about these things in more detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Air Marshal Khosla. This is just a announcement again, once again, that I see there are a few people standing behind, that there is also space in the library upstairs. A live cast of this is taking place there. And in case any older people come, I request those who are younger to please make space for them. So today's event, in addition to the BIC and the Dey family, has also been co-organized by the School for Democracy. So I now invite Nikhil Dey to introduce both the School for Democracy and today's speakers.
Thank you, Nachiket. Very briefly about the School for Democracy. It's a place, it's a physical place in Rajasthan, near the city of Byawar, conceived of as a space not just confined to that physical space, for reflection, learning, and planning for democratic action across the country. It believes that mutual learning is possible and necessary between different groups of people, even those who may not have been through formal learning. And because citizenship and democracy has to come from all our people with a sense of equality, it believes in that cross-learning. And finally, it can be seen for a place for strengthening democratic citizenship, active democratic citizenship, and we'll see examples of that in the talk today. The two speakers are ideal leaders in that entire effort, and we see them as partners in the School for Democracy. The topic today of transparency, accountability, and the threat to independent institutions, these two speakers, we are in the midst of an election. They both belong to ADR, and they are more than that. And the two most significant decisions in India since independence to ensure the independence and sanctity of the electoral process and transparency and accountability there has come from ADR. One that came about the candidates' disclosure of education, qualification, criminal background record, and assets and liabilities. It was an incredible decision when it came. For us in the RTI movement, it was absolutely a part of that, and I think we'd like to give a hand to ADR here for that. And perhaps even more significantly, a decision that came 2 months ago, February 15th, in far more difficult times. Perhaps the one decision from the Supreme Court in the last few years that one has felt, okay, here's an independent institution acting as it should, a decision on transparency of electoral bonds. That in this midst of this very dark time, that's been a ray of sunshine, and we will hear from them. I will now briefly talk about Major General Anil Verma. Completed his MSc in Defense Studies and MA in Political Science. He is the chairperson of CEO of ADR, and he has had a distinguished service in the Indian Army for 37 years. And as head of ADR, he looks at administrative and operational activities. He frequently contributes to debates, articles in English and Hindi, and we are a part of National Election Watch, which ADR has set up across the country, and I know that he oversees how can citizens actually get involved. So ADR is not just Association for Democratic Reform, it's a large network as well through National Election Watch. Professor Trilochan Sastry is the chairman and founder member and trustee of ADR. He taught at IIM Ahmedabad and was the dean at IIM Bangalore. He still is at IIM Bangalore. He's taught in universities in Japan, Hong Kong, in the US. He's known for his contribution to civil society. He's also actually, in MIT, you did maths. Trilochan, did you not?
You can call it applied maths.
Applied maths. So the application of it is much needed just now because that's what we are dealing with in this country. But apart from his role and his contribution to transparency and accountability in public life, he's looked at electoral reform, and we'll see some of that, but not just the Election Commission, the Supreme Court, the CAG, various other bodies, not just going to the Supreme Court, but also going to the people. But along with that, Trilochan Sastry has a deep interest in the interests of the farmers of the country. There's a group called Farm Veda, which he has helped found, and there are some of the people here, I wish they had brought their products. There's a whole range of products which you should sometime buy, which is all this dosa idli mix, but money goes straight to the farmers. And another thing that we have seen is that in this terrible mix of religion and politics, Trilochan has deeply studied all the religions of India to say that this mix is damaging to both. You keep religion to religion and keep politics to politics, and you'll do a world of good to both. And you mix the two, and you'll bring disaster not only to those but to the country that you live in. So that's also a part of Trilochan's very deep study, applied maths if you have it. And I just want to end by saying that in the midst of this election period, this idea, my father was in the armed forces, but spoke his mind as a citizen. The inspiration for us to do this is that you cannot have a politicized armed force, you cannot have a politicized bureaucracy, but you have to have people committed to constitutional values. ADR has played a huge role. The two speakers here have played a huge role in bringing our class of people into something that matters to every Indian, that matters to the Indian polity. We look forward to hearing from them.
Thank you, Nikhilji. So the agenda for today very broadly is that the speakers will speak for about an hour, and then based on the time left, we'll take some questions. So I request all of you, on your seats, you'd have got 2-3 sheets of paper. One of them, if you want to be in touch with the School for Democracy even later and want to engage with us, if you fill your contact details there or in the register outside, we'll be in touch with you. In case you need pens, please raise your hands. One of us will get near you with a pen. And in case you have any questions as well, please raise your hand and somebody will come there to you with a slip of paper and you can write your question down and we'll take them all in the end. So without further ado, I invite our first speaker today, Major General Anil Verma, to address the gathering.
Nikhil, about 20-25 minutes will be okay. Thank you. Dear all, good evening, namaskar and jai hind. At the outset, let me thank the Dey family, especially Mrs. Asha Dey, the School of Democracy and the BIC. And it's a privilege to be here, and especially with Arunaji here and Bankarji also here, whom I met for the first time. It was wonderful meeting him and interacting for a short while. And of course, Nikhil, for giving me this opportunity to interact with all of you. Now, Nikhil felt strongly that I had the right blend of a services background as also as an activist working with ADR for over a decade now to deliver this talk. After I retired in 2013, I decided to work consciously in the social sector, primarily with the aim of making a humble contribution to the civil society. It was give back time, as Air Marshal Khosla also mentioned about Air Marshal Dey. Some time back, Nikhil had shared an article written by Air Marshal Dey in 2010, which was published in the Hindu newspapers, in which he wrote about the need for more transparency in the defense sector, because defense sector is by and large treated as a holy cow. So in the first part today, I'll discuss this aspect, and in the second part, I will center on the journey of the ADR with special focus on and what it has achieved in the sphere of transparency and accountability in the political environment in the country for the last 25 years or so that the ADR has been in existence. So part one, about the transparency in the defense sector. For those of you who may not have read that article because it was an old one, the major issues which Air Marshal Dey mentioned in that article were as follows. Firstly, constant informed debates are required, involving not only the uniformed services and government officials, but also interested members of the public, academics, and the corporate sector. The second point he mentioned, in normal peacetime conditions, there is no need for laws of secrecy and confidentiality to vary from those which apply to the other government departments. Of course, barring operational plans, strategy, and tactics. Third point he raised was that secrecy cannot be applied forever. So he had given examples. For example, after the 62 war, the Brooks-Henderson report has still not been released. There's always some talk about that. Some time back also there was something. But it was not declassified. So he mentioned that. He said that experience of war and its appraisal must be brutally honest, so that remedial measures are taken to address the failures and shortcomings. The next point he mentioned was about defense deals. Kickbacks, etc. are there, we all know, and the political parties get it, whichever is the ruling political party of that time. So public should know what is the laid down procedure for evaluation and selection, and whether they are being adhered to, and whether records are being maintained. And the last point which he mentioned was that the intelligence and the security agencies which are working, their work must be monitored by the government. What he meant was institutional like the ISI and all. I mean, they are running things on their own. So all the observations, as I just mentioned, and recommendations which Air Marshal Dey, they are very well taken. Improving transparency in India's defense services will foster trust, efficiency, and strategic growth. It will ensure that the resources are allocated efficiently and the nation's security interests are well served. Since 2011, I'm mentioning now 11 because he wrote the article in 2010, there have been certain notable changes aimed at increasing transparency within the Indian Defense Services. I'll quickly just run through them. Firstly, the Right of Information Act came, and it played a significant role in enhancing the transparency across various government departments, including the defense sector. Online portals and information dissemination. This has started in a big way a few years back, and the Indian Defense Establishment has made efforts to improve access to information through online portals and websites. To give an example, for example, in our Army Ordnance Services, now all the auctions, etc., they are online. Earlier they used to be, and then there used to be a lot of give and take going on. So these type of things have happened. The defense procurement procedures. This has undergone a number of revisions to improve it in order to enhance transparency in the procurement processes. Measures such as introducing integrity pacts, conducting vendor interactions, promoting competitive bidding, and all this is basically aimed to ensure fairness and accountability in the defense acquisitions. Audit and oversight mechanisms. Independent audit agencies like the CAG, they play a crucial role in scrutinizing defense expenditure and operations, and their reports highlight irregularities, inefficiencies, and the areas for improvement. Parliamentary oversight. The Parliament also exercises oversight over defense matters through various parliamentary committees, debates, and discussions. And the members of the Parliament can question the defense officials, review defense budgets, and examine policy decisions. Again, this is fostering transparency and democratic accountability. Whistleblower protections. Efforts have also been made to strengthen the whistleblower protection mechanisms within the defense establishment. Public disclosure of defense deals. There have been calls for greater public disclosure of defense deals and contracts to ensure transparency and to prevent corruption. With sensitive national security considerations, because of these, they may limit the full disclosure. Efforts are to provide comprehensive information on major defense deal acquisitions, which help build public trust and confidence. So these changes, some of them which I mentioned, reflect the ongoing efforts to enhance transparency within the Indian Defense Services, acknowledging the importance of accountability, openness, and public scrutiny in safeguarding the national security interests. In addition to the above steps, it is desirable that some attention is also paid on the following three things. Firstly, independent audits. Regular audits by independent bodies to assess the financial transactions must be done. Second, technology adoption. Leverage technology for transparent and record keeping and real-time monitoring. Blockchain and artificial intelligence should also be used to enhance transparency. And lastly, engage civil society. Involve the civil society organizations, academia, and experts in the defense policy discussions and seek their inputs on transparency measures. With that, I'll come to the second part of the talk, ADR and its role in transparency. Now, along with various independent constitutional bodies, media, the judiciary, the civil society has an important role in holding the governments of the day accountable for their policies and actions. Irrespective of the promises made in the manifestos of the political parties in power, there are always gaps and slippages in the delivery to the public. In addition, there is also misuse of money, muscle power, arbitrary use of various laws against opponents or dissidents, inability to curb corruption, resistance to or completely ignoring the legitimate demands of the different sections of society, etc. Professor Sastry will be speaking on the role, functioning, and independence of our various institutions in detail, so I will not go into that. So this is where the civil society organization like ADR comes in. Now, some of you may not be aware of the background of ADR, so for their benefit, I'll quickly run through what is ADR all about. So the journey of ADR started in Professor Sastry's room while he was teaching in IIM Ahmedabad in 1999. Concerned with the rising criminality in politics, he decided to do something about it. And gradually, 10 other professors joined him, including Professor Jagdeep Chokar. And they filed a PIL in the Delhi High Court, seeking disclosures of pending criminal cases by the candidates contesting the elections in the parliament and the state assemblies. That was the beginning of ADR. The landmark judgment of the Supreme Court, which Nikhil also mentioned, was finally delivered in March 2003. And how that whole process went about is a story by itself. And because of lack of time, we will not be able to do it, but it was very interesting. Wherein 22 political parties got together, opposed the whole thing, went to Supreme Court. The government finally wanted to overturn the Supreme Court judgment. They passed an ordinance. The ordinance went to President Kalam. Kalam refused it, went back. Again it was sent, and then it was passed. And then again ADR went to Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, this is unconstitutional, and struck it down. And that is how the affidavits thing became mandatory. ADR is a non-partisan, apolitical NGO which works in the area of electoral and political reforms. The objective of ADR is to improve governance and strengthen democracy. It aims at decriminalization of politics, empowerment of the electorate, and bringing transparency, accountability, and inter-party democracy in the functioning of the political parties. ADR engages with partner organizations across the country, as Nikhil mentioned, collectively called the National Election Watch. This is a nationwide campaign composed of citizen-led organizations working towards strengthening democracy. It is active in almost all the states of India and has conducted election watches for all assembly and parliamentary elections since 2002. Election Watch is the flagship program of ADR. As part of this, background details of politicians are provided to citizens to help them make an informed choice during elections. ADR's second vertical is Political Party Watch Program. This is aimed at bringing more financial transparency and accountability in the functioning of the political parties. It analyzes the official financial declarations given by the national, state, and the unrecognized parties in India. The third vertical, judicial activism. We file PILs, appeals related to electoral and political reforms with the courts, with the Central Information Commission, etc., and also submit reports, submissions, recommendations, etc., to various central and state agencies, including the Parliamentary Standing Committee. Advocacy and outreach is an important and crucial aspect of ADR's work. Our communication and campaigning activities have multiple objectives, like spreading awareness of the importance of ethical and informed voting ahead of the parliamentary, assembly, or local body elections, and continuous efforts to engage with the youth in the political and electoral reforms process. Now, in the 25th year of ADR's existence, as we look back, we find that in addition to the grassroots level voter awareness campaigns and advocacy that we conduct with the help and support of our state partners, there have been a number of judicial interventions by ADR that has had the effect of making the functioning of political parties in the government of the day more transparent and accountable. Apart from the two which were mentioned, the affidavits case and the electoral bonds case, some of the other ones, little known ones, I'll just run out quickly. Introduction of the nota button in the EVMs in 2013. Another judgment in 2013 regarding the disqualification of convicted MPs and MLAs, in which Lalu and others were convicted. Holding BJP and Congress guilty of accepting foreign funding and violating the provisions of FCRA in March 2014. In 2018, in the matter related to disproportionate assets of the elected representatives and a mechanism to cross-verify their assets in the affidavits, the Supreme Court ruled that complete details of spouse and dependents also must be declared by the candidate. In 2023 came the Supreme Court judgment on the petition challenging the constitutional validity of the present system, practice of appointment of the election commissioners by the executive. And lastly, in February 24 came the landmark electoral bond judgment. Another judgment, yesterday only there was a hearing, was about the delay in the publication of the voters turnout thing. Since it was the last day of the court and now the vacations have started, it was heard till about 6:15 in the evening. And then the Chief Justice directed that on 24th, the next hearing will be held. Basically, the election commission was buying for more time so that the elections could get over, but he did not accept that. So let's see what happens on the 24th. Now, speaking specifically about the people's right to know, upholding and strengthening the RTI, a number of initiatives have been taken by ADR. In February 2007, ADR filed an RTI application with the CPIO of CBDT, the Central Board of Direct Taxes, requesting for information whether political parties were submitting their income tax returns between 2002 and 2007. Finally, in 2008, the CIC gave a landmark ruling that the income tax returns and the assessment orders of all political parties would be available in the public domain. In October 2010, ADR filed an RTI application seeking information on the source, mode of payment, amount, and year of donation received by the 6 national parties. After a protracted battle of almost 3 years, in June 2013, the full bench of CIC, which comprises of 3 members, declared all 6 national parties as public authorities under the RTI Act. You'll be surprised to know none of the political parties complied with the Commission's order. Ultimately, on 16th March 2015, the CIC said that the RTI Act does not provide the Commission with ample powers to deal with cases of contempt and non-compliance. So we had no choice but to go to the Supreme Court, but it's not been heard till now. On 3rd June 2011, the CIC, in an appeal filed by ADR, brought the pecuniary information of the Rajya Sabha members in the public domain, which means they were told to maintain a members register of interest, in which they are supposed to, so that the idea is that the public knows what business interest does this MP have, and is there no clash of interest, the type of questions they ask and money that they take and all that sort of thing. So we also wanted the similar thing to be done in the Lok Sabha, and we've been pushing it, but nothing has happened so far. RTI applications and appeals were also filed, raising concerns about the functioning of the electoral bond scheme and the lack of oversight by authorities such as the ECI. Professor Sastry has also already given a talk on the electoral bonds thing, but there were so many anomalies in the way it was being run. Nobody knew what is happening. Anyway, the Supreme Court gave a good judgment. By the way, we did not ask the Supreme Court in IPIL to match the details, who gave whom and all that. We had just said that the scheme should be scrapped because it is not good. Attention of the ECI was also, Election Commission of India, was also drawn by filing RTI applications in various states across the country for the non-availability of unrecognized parties' audit and donation statements on the CEO's websites in the states. Later, in the next year, the Election Commission did take cognizance of our complaints and RTIs, and they declared some of the unrecognized parties as inactive and non-existent, and they were struck off the rolls. Now, coming to the role of money power and muscle power. This is evident from the fact that all major political parties, up to the 6th phase, which is going on now, we have already published the report yesterday, they have fielded 31% candidates who are crorpatis and 19% candidates who have criminal cases against themselves, and 14% out of them have serious criminal cases against them. Now, this is for the candidates. When the results come out, you will find that this will more than double. Because the guys who win are the ones who have maximum criminal cases and who have maximum money. It is as simple as that. And our ADR statistics reveals, over the years we've been doing this research, that the chances of winning of a guy with criminal cases and serious criminal cases are 15.5 times, whereas an untainted candidate who doesn't have any criminal cases, chances of winning are 4.7%. So this is the state of our political parties. And as a thumb rule, I can tell you, all political parties give tickets to at least 33% people who have got criminal cases against them. It is pure and simple winnability factor. This close and alarming nexus between the money power and muscle power has got so ingrained in our electoral system that the citizens are left hostage to the current situation. Money and muscle power hurts the principle of free and fair elections, participatory democracy, and level paying field. There are a number of recommendations for political and electoral reforms which have been given to the government by the Election Commission, various committees, Law Commission, and of course the civil society organizations. Unfortunately, they are completely ignored. And just to recap, some of the recommendations are permanent disqualification of candidates convicted of heinous crimes like murder, rape, smuggling, dacoity, kidnapping, etc. Yesterday or day before, I saw the Andhra report. Out of 383 candidates, there were 28 candidates who had attempt to murder charges against them. 28 out of 383. And there were 8 who had murder charges. There were 7 or 8 again who had crime against women. One guy had a rape case against him. So that is the type of thing we are dealing with. Disqualification of persons from contesting elections to the public offices against whom charges have been framed for having committed serious criminal offenses, punishable by imprisonment for at least 5 years. And the case has been filed in the last 6 months prior to the elections. You see, the politicians say कि ये तो झूठे मुकदमे हैं, हमारे ऊपर थोप दिए जाते हैं, elections are coming and all that. So that is why this 6 months thing is there. Implementation of the Supreme Court judgment dated 23rd September 13, that is provision of the nota. Now, you see, people say it is toothless, nothing happens, it's a waste of a vote. That is the common perception. It depends how you look at it. The percentage is varying between 1 to 1.5, 1.6% votes are polled for nota in most of the elections. But there is a need to go to the next step now. So if in particular constituency, if the nota votes are more than the candidate's vote, the candidates should be disqualified. Whereas presently in the first past post the system, if the nota, hypothetically I am saying, gets 1,000 votes, and there is a candidate who gets 800 votes, he is still elected. Whoever has got the highest vote gets elected. So there is a need to change this. And all the candidates should be debarred for 6 years from contesting elections. Fresh elections should be held and new candidates should come up. The Election Commission of India and the State Election Commission to make it mandatory that in all elections, whether parliamentary, assembly, local body, they should place boards outside the polling booth displaying details of the candidates' criminal records, assets, liabilities, and education qualifications. The Election Commission of India has not done it, but some of the state election commissions like Maharashtra, Haryana, and I think Madhya Pradesh, they had done it. So it is doable. So the need of R is now to carry out a stock taking of where do we stand. Examine how the independent constitutional bodies are functioning currently as regards the people's right to know, transparency, and accountability, and what is the way forward as far as the public and the civil society organizations concerned. The other day I read in one of the newspapers this thing by Elie Wiesel. He said, there may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest against the injustice. Agreed, we have great income inequality, large-scale corruption, unemployment, inadequate health and educational infrastructure, overburdened judicial system, lakhs of under-trials languishing in jail, ethnic strife, poor governance, crumbling institutions, deteriorating law and order situation, abuse of human rights, increasing violence in the society, and so on and so on. I can go on. The list is never ending. It is easy to list out the negatives. But the problem is, what is the solution to these challenges? And I feel there is never a perfect solution wherever humans are concerned. So, if I were to restrict myself to the dimension of political and electoral reform, then one thing is very clear. That you cannot expect the political parties or the government to reform themselves, especially in a scenario where 45 to 50% lawmakers are lawbreakers. A regional assessment is that 80% of the reforms in the electoral and political field that have taken place so far have come about through good judicial judgments. However, the courts have their own way of functioning. The electoral bonds case took 6 years. And after 6 reminders, after every assembly election which used to take place, before that, we used to file a petition or appeal to the Supreme Court, please hear this case. It took us 6 years. But when the court feels like Arnab Goswami's case is heard within a day or even at night. So the approach which is adopted by ADR is judicial activism, advocacy, and voter awareness campaigns. Though we feel that governance will improve once good, untainted candidates with clean images are elected to the legislature, the catch is, as I mentioned earlier, 1/3 of the candidates are given tickets when they have criminal cases against themselves. So when the government and the agencies do not deliver the public services or resolve the grievances of the citizens, then the public relies on these tainted, rich, and powerful politicians to address their basic needs and societal needs. In this scenario, it becomes difficult to convince the poor, marginalized rural voter not to vote for the tainted candidates. The person whose ration card has been made, or a loan has been arranged from the bank, or a gift in cash and kind has been given for his daughter's marriage by the local politician. He is not overly concerned about the criminal background of that politician. So there are a number of suggestions what can be done. One is access to information. We make sure that the voters get as much information about the background details of the candidates. But will it make a difference in his selection? Because largely votes are cast based on caste, number one, and religion, number two. Or some hype is created and emotionally people vote. So media literacy, independent journalism, and all that is required. Then protecting rights, safeguarding fundamental rights such as freedom of speech, assembly, association, etc. is required in a healthy democracy. Equal access to the electoral process. We see a lot of things taking place in this. People are not permitted to go and vote, and names are struck off the rolls. So your story is over even before the elections are there. If your name is not there, you can't vote. Disclosure of corporate and political spending by the political parties. This is required. Stakeholders engagement. We need to engage with the election commission, the CEOs, the political parties, the civil society through consultation process, dialogues, roundtable discussions, public hearings, etc. And empowering independent institutions by strengthening the independent electoral commission or the bodies responsible for overseeing the electoral process. That, of course, Professor Sastry will speak about that. But before I end, I just wanted to read out an article which I read on 15th May in the Frontline entitled Fall of the Election Commission of India. So it quotes two Harvard professors, Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt. They speak of the unwritten norms of the soft guardrails. Soft guardrails, they mean that in a democracy, there have to be opposition, they have to be listened to, there is to be debate, discussion, disagreement, and all that. That is what democracy is all about. And so he mentions there's a political scientist, Joan Linz. He gives a set of 4 warning signs that indicate democracy is being undone. Number 1, politicians in power break written and unwritten democratic behavioral norms. Second, they tolerate or encourage violence. Third, attempts are made to deny the legitimacy of opponents. And fourth, there are attempts to curtail the liberties of opponents. And we can see instances of this happening in our society. So to conclude, a 3-pronged approach to improve governance, strengthen inner party democracy, enhance transparency and accountability. Accountability is what I'm going to mention. First, targeting the political parties not to field corrupt and tainted candidates. Second, focusing on intensive campaigns to educate the voters, especially the youth, regarding the long-term disadvantages of electing tainted candidates. And third, to maintain pressure on the political parties and the government through judicial activism for transparency and accountability. This requires a concerted effort from all citizens, and this responsibility cannot be shouldered by the civil society alone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Major General Verma, for a very articulate talk, not just outlining the problems, but also offering solutions and also being a part of it. Before I now invite Professor Sastry, just a quick reminder to please, if you would like to be in touch, to fill in the slips of paper that have been there on your seats. If you have not got the slip or you need a pen, please raise your hand and one of us will get to you. And if you have any questions, we'll try and finish on time. So let's see how much time we have for questions. But if you have a question, please do write it on the slip. And again, if you need a pen or a slip, please raise your hand. I now invite Professor Sastry to please share his thoughts.
Hello. You want me to operate it? Huh? I'll be able to do it? Okay. It's only for you. Okay, thank you. Oh, it's not on the screen. You can't get it on the screen? We are doing that. Huh? Okay. Okay. Good evening and big thanks to the Dey family for inviting us here. It's an honor and a privilege. And also to be speaking at the BIC. General Verma has made the task much easier. So I am not going to speak about ADR, but what Nikhil kind of instructed me to do, which is to speak about the threat to independent institutions in India's democracy. So let me see, how does this go down? There's a page down somewhere, right? Here it is. Yeah. So when we talk about, I started work in the development sector more than 25 years ago, a little bit junior to Nikhil, whom I admire enormously. He's actually one of my role models, as is Aruna. We used to keep hearing about this institutional framework, and I used to wonder, what does it mean? So after so many years, a little bit of clarity is there, so I will focus on what are these independent institutions, and why is it important that they should remain independent in a democracy? What does it have to do with democracy? And what threats do we face from time to time? And what can be done? Of course, that is always the most important thing. What can we do about it? So just a little bit of background, concept or theory, which may be a little boring, but they talk about three organs of the government, which is traditionally the executive, the legislator, and the judiciary. And I think Air Marshal Khosla also mentioned the medium. So the executive basically is the union cabinet of ministers and the president. Of course, it includes the prime minister. And the framers of our constitution, not only in India but around the world, because some constitutions were written before India's constitution, they were constantly wrestling with this issue that what are the checks and balances to the executive excesses? What happens if a president or a prime minister or the executive becomes over-powerful and dictatorial? What checks can we put? So most of the constitutions in the world, including India, do have them. So we'll discuss that a little bit. The legislature is in India, very simple terms, the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. I'm not getting into the state level thing. We'll just stick to the national one for now. And the executive is supposed to implement the laws made by parliament, frame policies based on those laws, etc. And the Supreme Court sees whether these laws are constitutional, whether their implementation is being done properly, and they also have the power to punish. So let me just give you an example. There was a move in India some time back. They float trial balloons. So they said, particularly our dear Vice President, he said several times, he's also a lawyer, that once a law has been passed by parliament, there should be no power of judicial review. I'm just trying to see whether the Indian public will react. Of course, we don't react. In Israel, when they tried to do that, in Israel they wanted to pass a law which says that the Supreme Court of Israel shall not be able to strike down any law passed by the Israeli parliament. There are only 6 million people in Israel, so I don't know how many lakhs of people poured out onto the streets because they didn't want that kind of a situation. Why is it important for the Supreme Court to be independent? We will come to that as we go along. The other independent institutions formally are the Election Commission of India and the CAG, formerly the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. There are several other constitutional bodies, but I'm not going to speak much, like the Finance Commission, the State Election Commissions, the UPSC, incidentally, the National Commission for Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribe and OBCs, etc. There are many constitutionally independent bodies. What does it mean? In operational terms, what it means is the Chief Election Commissioner of India or the Chief Justice of India or any of the judges cannot be transferred, suspended or thrown out by any executive. If they have to be removed, they have to be impeached in Parliament by 2/3 majority. So that constitutional immunity gives them a lot of independence in the way they function. Otherwise, they would be at least legally completely under the control of the executive. So Mr. Session comes to mind because in one of his earliest talks, he said that when he became the Chief Election Commissioner, he started studying the Constitution and he was trying to find out whom do I report to and who is my boss. And he, of course, he has a style of speaking. He said, I realize that I have no boss. I don't report to anybody. But he does. He reports to the Constitution of India. I mean, that much is there. So that's the meaning of a constitutionally independent body. And I would invite all of you to think about why the framers of our Constitution and around the world felt that it is important to have such independent constitutional authorities. It is the simple reason that I could figure out, it is to protect the nation against the excesses or dictatorial tendencies of the executive. Then there are some other important institutions which are not constitutional, but they are also quite important. One is, of course, the Reserve Bank of India. So I'll just mention before I forget about the Reserve Bank of India. World over, there are central banks, and the central banks, by tradition, operate independent of the government. So a trivial example, some of you are better informed about economics and finance, is about interest rates. So to control inflation, the central banks, including the Reserve Bank of India, wants to increase the interest rates. But the finance minister, who is always in most countries aligned with business interests, wants to reduce the interest rates, and that conflict is there. In truly independent reserve banks or central banks, they don't worry about what the government is telling them to do. Now, our wonderful government in 2016 amended the RBI Act and appointed a monetary planning committee or commission, MPC, with half the members of that being from the RBI and other half being independent, so-called independent people appointed by the government. So now they would look at the interest rates. So we have a government which has been toying with the constitution again and again. The most dramatic example of that was the electoral bonds. In the electoral bonds, which I mentioned earlier also, but briefly for those who are here for the first time, they amended the Finance Act and they amended 4 acts. The RBI Act, which I just mentioned, the Income Tax Act, the Companies Act, and the Representation of People Act. So they amended 4 laws to introduce a bill or a scheme of electoral bonds which would be completely opaque. If we did not have the power of judicial review, that scheme would still be on. And just to drive home the point, one unknown company in one of the states gave 140 crores of donation to the ruling party, and they got 14,000 crores of government contracts. So if we did not have that independence of the Supreme Court, you can imagine that the public resource, and this is for public contracts from the government. So one has to see that this independence of the constitutional authority is very, very, very important. Now, one psychological question is, whom do these institutions work for? Of course, we have the police, the CBI, and the IB, and the Income Tax Department, which are much in the news nowadays. And we have three particular laws which are being used and misused in this country. One of them is the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, UAPA. More than 8,000, nearly 9,000 people have been arrested under this UAPA since this government has taken over. Under the Sedition Act, nearly 1,000 people have been arrested. And under this PMLA, that is Prevention of Money Laundering Act, I forget the number, it is there in one of the slides, I'll come to that. Now, you see, the problem with this whole issue is the following. When the electoral bond scheme was introduced, the Reserve Bank of India wrote that if you introduce this scheme, it will encourage money laundering. And did it encourage money laundering? You can see the list of people who have donated through the electoral bonds. So, now, a little bit of, this requires a lot of thinking, and I think all of us need to think about this, that how does an institution remain independent? I mean, we try our best. Of course, human beings finally fill up those positions and they do whatever they have to do. But constitutionally and legally, what do we do? So one is, of course, that constitutional independence. They cannot be sacked, they cannot be transferred, they can only be impeached. That gives them a lot of strength. Then who appoints them? Now, General Verma had mentioned in passing that the Supreme Court, of course, on ADR's petition last year, said that we need a neutral body which appoints the election commission, because over the years we had been watching with a little bit of trepidation that it is only the Prime Minister who appoints the election commissioners. That was always true. It's not nothing new. But over the years we saw how, because we have been dealing with the election commission since 2002 at least, so about 22 years, and how they used to receive the civil society petitions then and how do they do now. Now they don't give us time of day, by the way, to be very frank. So we went to the court and said that a neutral body should appoint the election commission. So the Supreme Court, in its wisdom, among many choices that were given by us, they said that the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and the Chief Justice of India, these three would appoint they have ignored that royally, introduced a bill in contravention of the Supreme Court and said that the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition and a Union Cabinet Minister will be appointing the Election Commission. The point is not about the Election Commission, the point is the process of appointing these constitutional authorities is also a critical part of ensuring that they are independent. That's the point that I was trying to make. Another important thing is what happens after they retire. So if you just take the three bodies, the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, the CAG, the Election Commission, and the Supreme Court. Surprisingly, in the Constitution, it says that the CAG shall not accept any government position after retirement. But that is the only post which is barring government. Now, what do we find in the case of the Election Commission of India? The first election commissioner we met when we started our work, I can mention it later on in private. After he stepped down as Chief Election Commissioner of India, he joined the ruling party and became a cabinet minister. Now it calls into question whether he was actually independent during the years that he was in office. So there have been moves to try and say there should be a cooling period of 3 years, 5 years. Neither the government doesn't know, no government wants it, because they would rather have somebody who's looking for some goodies post-retirement so that they have some leverage over such people. And of course, what to say about the Supreme Court? We have a Supreme Court Chief Justice who is now a Rajya Sabha member. Some of them have become governors. In the United States, for the very same reason that we are talking of, that is to maintain true independence post-retirement, I'm not saying that's a good remedy. They are saying there's no retirement age for judges. I mean, they can retire on their own, but because they're not going to get anything after retirement, so that's it. So we have to think about these issues of how do you appoint them, what do they do after they retire, and of course, how do they function, and what are the constitutional guarantees we give them while they are in office. So this is also part of guaranteeing the independence of these constitutional authorities. Now, I've already mentioned about the electoral bond, so I will not talk about that. Now, coming to the law and order authorities and the income tax authorities, because I think all of us have stories, we must have read either on WhatsApp or some friend or something has happened. One friend who was very instrumental in setting up two very reputed universities, one in Delhi and one in Mohali in Chandigarh, he is now under CBI raid. I don't know why. So the independence of these institutions, so from 2014 to 2022, that the data I could get, 121 leaders were arrested, of which 115 were from the opposition. So, I mean, you don't need to have a PhD from MIT in applied mathematics to figure out that this is highly biased. 115 out of 121 people were from the opposition, right? So why is this happening? Is the police truly independent? All of you must be having personal stories. I also have personal stories of talking to retired director generals of police of various states, and there are very interesting things they say. The Election Commission of India has received literally more than 20,000 complaints during this ongoing election. Some of the people who complained are sitting right here in the front row. No action has been taken. That is because if the complaints are against those in power, they will not act. If the complaints are against those not in power, then they may act if they feel like. So is the ECI still independent or not? There is an old saying, both I will quote from English and from our Hindi and Sanskrit, Caesar's wife must be above suspicion. And Sita must be above suspicion. Usko 2 baar Agni Pariksha karwai, which is not correct thing to do. I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong. But that is what we expect from the Election Commission of India. The mere suspicion of not being independent, that suspicion should also be removed. And I don't think that we have made any effort to do that. Now, the other thing that we find today is the hate speeches which are going on in India has the proud record of being the world record holder in hate speeches. Yes, we have the maximum number. How many of you sitting here are on WhatsApp groups where people abuse each other and you say, this guy was my friend, that guy is my uncle, he is my sister, he is my brother, he is my cousin. Yeah, aisi baatein kar raha hai. I couldn't believe that he was like this. Everybody must be having that experience. So now we are divided within the society, and the origin of this is politics. It is due to politics that this is happening. I know husbands and wives who don't talk to each other about politics because one person is supporting one and the other is against that. So that's how it is. Now, these hate speeches are against the Model Code of Conduct, which is not enforceable by law, but they are also against the Representation of People Act, and they are also against the Indian Penal Code. Section 153 of the Indian Penal Code says that giving hate speeches is a cognizable offense. So, inciting people on the basis of caste or religion, or insulting people's caste or religion, is a criminal offense under the Indian Penal Code, which has been passed by the Parliament. India is the world record holder in this. Now, are these institutions which are supposed to monitor this, whether it's the Election Commission or the police, are they independent? They are following what I call the Bhishma, Bhishma sat silently, he's a great man, no doubt, when Draupadi was being publicly disrobed. So many of our wise and elderly people, they follow the model of Bhishma, which is find what is dharma, what is not dharma. It's a very deep subject, let us not discuss this when he was asked. That's what Bhishma said. Better to follow Krishna or Rama's. Rama said nothing doing, I don't know. I'm going to act, I'm going to do things. So we need those kind of people who are manning these institutions. Yeah, so I have talked about the UAPA, the Sedition Act, the PMLA. Now, some of you may not know this, but it is very scary when you have such laws and you don't have independence. For example, if you are arrested under sedition, for 6 months the government or the police doesn't even have to file a charge sheet. They are supposed to be non-bailable. These laws were introduced, by the way, by the British government to protect their officers, because anybody fighting for independence back then was supposed to be seditious. Unfortunately, the same thing is being applied by our own government, so people are being hauled up for sedition. Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, a collector, on the mere suspicion that in the coming days so and so is going to create trouble, can just put him under preventive arrest. Now, these kind of non-democratic things, these laws exist in this country. And we need to do something about it. Maybe we have to discuss. I don't know whether the courts will uphold any petition on this or not. So this is showing that since the number of, from 2014, 8,947 people were arrested under UAPA. Much more than ever before in Indian history. Under the Sedition Act, 788 people were cases were registered. Under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, 1,797 cases were registered. And so on and so forth. So this is really showing that the number of such cases is going up. And so here is a fundamental question on independence. If you and I break the law, the government can arrest us and put us in jail after some process. That's fine. I think most of us say it's all right. We don't want lawbreakers. But what happens if the government breaks the law? What happens if the police breaks the law? There is nothing in the legal system or the constitution. In the United States Constitution, there is something which is loosely called the tort law, which means that a citizen can actually sue the government of the United States if their fundamental rights or something, actually sue them and claim damages. We don't have, because if we do, government waisi diwala hai, so all of us will be filing tort cases against the government, to ud jayega. So maybe it's good that we don't have such a law here. So the RBI I have mentioned. So I'm going to close now. I think I must be running out of time. How much time do we have? Yeah, 5 minutes, 2 minutes? Yeah. So it all brings back to the question that what is democracy? Is not that we only vote once in 5 years. We've heard that. But very often we don't think enough about these institutions and their independence. How is it going to happen? Actually, I have to thank Nikhil for suggesting this topic, because I wouldn't have dared to do it otherwise. So the only way to check executive excess, whether it is through these institutions, the Supreme Court, the ECI, the CAG, the Indian Police Service, the Civil Services, the CBI, IB, ED, etc. Donald Trump is right now sitting in court. When, what's his name? Bill Clinton was President of the United States, Ken Starr was the independent attorney just appointed, and he was going hammer and tongs publicly against Bill Clinton, who was the sitting President of the United States. Do we have such a system here? When George Bush was President, his 2 grown-up daughters were caught for drunken driving in Texas. The law of Texas is very clear, no bail, 48 hours jail. So both his daughters were in jail for 48 hours because they were caught drunken. And the President of the United States or nobody ever dared to call anybody and say, yaar, chhod do unko. Because that would have made it worse. that would have gone public. So we have not evolved as a democracy. We say, what can we do? What can we do? That is the kind of situation that we are in. So what is the way forward? I think he has already mentioned. I think it's not only MKSS or the RTI campaigns or chota mota organizations like ADR or civil society. I think all citizens need to get engaged in whatever way we can. We have to get out of this Bhishma mode of watching a woman being disrobed in public and keeping quiet and quoting philosophy and what is dharma and adharma. We have to take to arms like Lord Rama himself and start taking action. That is the only way I can see of getting these things done. It's not so bad because public action we saw recently, at least I think Aruna and Nikhil and I and people like us, we loved it. The farmers of India, maybe largely from a North Indian state, they protested and the government had to take back its laws. You remember those farm laws? They were repealed because of public action. That is democracy. And why should we leave it to some poor farmers to do that? All of us also should join that kind of a scheme. So I'm going to stop here and thank you once again, Nikhil and Mrs. Dey and the Dey family for allowing me to speak here. It was a great honor and a privilege. And thanks to all of you who have come here and listened. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Sastry. You were commenting about TN Session's style of speaking. I think all of us also found you equally engaging and could have continued listening to you. But unfortunately, we have to all also get back home. So we have time, I think, for a couple of questions. I have 2-3 questions that I've received. I'll read out the questions and then we can take the answers, and then the remaining questions we are just collecting. We will get the responses of the speakers and get back to you. But unfortunately, because of time, right now we can take just 2-3 questions. The first question is why the PM Cares fund is still untouched. This is the first question. I'll just take all the questions and then in the PM Cares. So in the interest of time, I'll just read all the questions and maybe quickly there can be a round of response. And then to Major General Verma, there was a question, is there any possibility to add electoral restrictions in penal code punishments? That is, a person convicted for crime against women cannot contest election for 6 years. So this is a question that has come. And to Professor Sastry, I believe most of the religions are born out of politics. Definitely not from electoral politics. Yeah, this is what the question is, the comment, and then the question is how do we separate them? So how do we separate religion and politics? That's the question. And then another question is, good people like you are working hard to bring in positive changes in the electoral process and politics, but the number of people with criminal records and convictions is increasing continuously. Is there hope for us? So there are more questions that are coming, but I think for now we'll restrict to this. Major General Verma? Just.
Hello. Yeah, thank you. So the first question regarding the criminal cases and especially against women, etc. So let me tell you, there have been a number of PILs, not one. There are a number of PILs on which the Supreme Court is hearing, wherein the petitioners, there is one guy called Ashwini Upadhyay, and he belongs to BJP, by the way. He's a lawyer, but he keeps filing good petitions at times. So his case is this, which I mentioned, that people with heinous crimes should be disqualified, barred from contesting elections. Supreme Court has heard that a number of times, and it is still going on. The process is still on. Because if that happens, then in one go, the political parties will have no option but to field people who do not have such cases against them.
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah, please.
I don't know, is this mic on? Yeah. See, the questioner used the word convicted. If someone is convicted. So the law is, if you are convicted of a crime which carries a sentence of 2 years or more, you are actually disqualified. But I think he took it in the spirit of, you are charged with a crime, you are undergoing trial but not yet convicted, then what happens? So his answer was in that spirit. So the short answer is, if somebody is convicted of a crime against women, he or she cannot stand for elections.
If it is, he is already convicted, then you cannot. That's quite clear. And the second question was about hope. So that is what I mentioned. The hope part is, I told you it's a vicious circle. We are like hostages. We don't give tickets to the candidates. It is the political parties which do it. And why do they do it? They want self-financing candidates so that they don't have to spend money. Firstly, the candidate buys the ticket, 5 crores, 10 crore, whatever the rate going is, depending on the area. Then he does the campaign expense himself, and then he gets elected. And when he gets elected, then he makes 10, 15, 20 times the amount of money which he has invested, firstly for himself, and also gives some to the party coffers. So this, and we all, and Professor Chokar I must mention, people, he always asks this question to young people. Who elects the government? And everybody says, we do. He says, you're wrong. And for the reason which I just told you. It is the political parties who give the ticket. You and me have no say. We don't have that thing of primaries and surveys being done, who's the most popular guy there and all. If you were to read the reasons which they have, by the way, there have been a number of judgments by the Supreme Court. They directly don't say that political parties should not give tickets to this thing. They say this is not our job, this is the job of the executive. The parliament should pass this law, which will never happen. But they do keep passing certain laws. One law which they passed about 2-3 years back was that there is a Form 7, Form 7C, and there is another Form 5 which has to be filled, in which the political parties have to give reasons as to why are they giving tickets to people, candidates with criminal cases. You will be surprised to, we do a study, they are supposed to put it on their websites, they are supposed to put it in the social media, and it is supposed to be signed by the local, whoever the politician boss is. The reasons that they give, he is the best person available. He's got 10 murder cases against him, but they say he's the best person available. He did very good work in COVID times. He's the most popular guy amongst the voters. These type of silly reasons they give. And the Supreme Court has given very strict instructions that if these details are not published within 48 hours of the candidate's affidavit being filed, contempt thing is can be put against them. Till now, nothing has been done. Election Commission doesn't do anything. The political parties obviously will not do anything. So one lawyer went to the court, this thing was introduced in the last Bihar elections, and he said, you had given these directions, no party has done it. So Supreme Court passed contempt proceedings, and 8 political parties penalties were levied on 8 political parties, ranging from 1 lakh rupees to 5 lakh rupees, which is peanuts for them. Nothing happened after that. The same thing is continuing again. So that's why I'm saying it is a vicious circle. And this can be broken. Question of hope is always there. There is always light at the end of the tunnel. But it is a thing in which somehow the common man, the citizens, we don't want to get involved. This is not an issue which people want to go to the streets for. Because these are not bread and butter issues. Professor Sastry can tell you, we've done 3 surveys, national level surveys. 30 questions were there, out of which 5 questions were based on this. You might like to tell them. 35% were asked, why do you vote for people with criminal cases? They said he does good work. Now, good work means what? He gets their things done because he's a powerful guy. Do you know that taking freebies, daru, paisa, is wrong? Say, yes, we know. But they still take it. So these type of things are there. They know, and then we asked them, do you know that this guy, this candidate has got criminal cases against himself? 35% said, yes, we know. But still they will vote. So it is a very, very tricky and a very complicated thing which cannot be solved easily. So that is why we focus on voter awareness. And that is why we started this new program about 5 years back, which we call Hum Badlenge Apna Bharat, in which me, my colleagues, the trustees, we talk to the youth. We go around to colleges, we go around to schools, and we tell the kids, look, it is your future. This is what is happening now. And if you guys don't put pressure on the political parties when you grow up, because it's just not a question of increasing the voter percentage. That is what we are focusing on all the time. Voter percentage badhna chahiye. But it is the question of electing good people. And political parties will field good people only when public pressure is there on them. They are afraid of only one thing, losing an election. That's it. So if there is enough public pressure and then they agree to field good candidates, that can be the only solution. Would you like to say something?
You want me to take that question on religion at all? Yeah. No, this will require a long discussion, but the basic contention of the questioner is that all religions are born out of politics. That's a wonderful suggestion you have. I just finished writing a second book. First book I wrote was on the essentials of Hinduism. I just finished writing a second book called The Essentials of World Religions, where I studied the Abrahamic religions, which is Judaism, Islam, Christianity, the Indian religions, which are Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. I don't want to get into details, but every time you read, Moses went into the desert and he heard the voice of God. I don't know whether God was teaching him politics. Jesus went into the desert for 40 days and prayed and fasted. Muhammad went into the Hira cave and prayed and fasted for 40 days. And our rishis and munis went into the forest to meditate. I don't know whether God was, whether there is a God or not, I'm not getting into that. Whether these religions were born because some higher truth told them, "Arey, politics karo yaar jaake." They were a quest for truth and peace and joy, etc. I do not think that these religions were born out of politics. They might have got politicized later on, but that, how it got politicized and what history has done, that is a very long discussion, so I'm not going to discuss it. How do you separate the two? Now, again, this requires a longer discussion. You see, we take it as a, so I will just quote Medha Patkar once she said, because Gandhi, was he a politician or not? We can discuss it till the cows come home. Every day he was singing Raghupati Raghava Rajaram. Every day he was singing Vaishnav Janma To Tene Kahiye Peed Paraya Jane Re. It brings tears to your eyes. He was singing religious songs every day. The first person to use the word Ram Rajya in modern Indian history was Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. What is the problem? Nobody protested against him for that. So I think we will discuss whether and how we should separate politics and religions. It will require a long discussion. We are not going to be able to do it here.
Thank you very much. There are many other questions that have come. Unfortunately, we have really run out of time. So I'll just read out the questions, but I don't think we will have time to...
Yeah, I just mailed it.
Okay, so we'll mail you the questions. And also a quick reminder, in case any of you want to be in touch, there is this card you would have on your chair. If you don't have a card, you can raise your hand. One of us will come there and get in touch with you. So in closing and to offer the vote of thanks, I invite Arunaji.
We are actually running short of time. There's so many things that have been raised in the course of all the comments that have been made, the issues that have been raised, the logic and the analyses. I really don't think we'll do justice. I can do justice in terms of summarizing anything, but I'd just like to comment on a few things that are critically important. You know, when we listen to India's predicament or the world's predicament today, very often we are in absolute confusion because there's so many things that are wrong. But I think of George Orwell, who said in times of universal deceit, to speak the truth is a revolutionary act. It's really a condition from which we all have to learn to speak the truth, to question, to ask for transparency, to ask for accountability, things that are simple and interpretable. What is transparency and accountable to a person in the village is very different from what is transparency and accountability to us. But the fact that today there are 60 to 80 lakh people using the Right to Information Act all over the country, asking questions legitimately is a very important thing. And I think one lesson that I take back from what I've heard this evening is that that legitimacy, when it's used in a systematic manner, in a concentrated manner, in a focused manner, really gives huge results. I think those of us who want a revolution today, we don't have to pick up a gun. All that we have to do is to question. And that's a critical thing. And I think as intelligent people who belong to this country and who love this country and want it to be a great country, I think it's an important thing that we ask questions. The other thing that I want to emphasize, because I also come from the School for Democracy, which Jean Drees and I and Nikhil and many others together set up, is that actually governance and running a democracy is a very complex issue. It's beyond even mathematical professors of mathematics and generals from the army, but it's certainly too much for ordinary people to understand. So how do you translate the complexity of governance, the intricate nature of asking for justice, to a poor person who doesn't have food, shelter, clothing, or anything? So the School for Democracy was really set up to interpret governance, justice, the Constitution, our rights, into a language that enabled the ordinary person to ask for justice in a manner in which he or she could get justice in much the same way as General Verma and Trilochan have got us answers to the electoral bonds. It's possible. And it's this possibility that I think really makes us all go ahead, and where the friendship between ADR and MKSS and School for Democracy and so many other campaigns exist, is that we persevere. We persevere, we look at the details, and we want answers. I want to say too that the complexity needs space, and this is an excellent space where we have been able to look at cultural complexities, the question on religion, for instance, political complexities. How do you deal with the necessity for a democracy, the necessity for representative politics, and that entire system seeped in corruption today? We're all sitting here looking and expecting to see a change in the electoral results, knowing fully well that the process has been one of the most corrupt processes that we have seen so far. Unbelievable things have happened. And of course, I won't mention the EVM. That's another huge area of controversy. Whether the EVMs can be fixed or not fixed, whether it's being tampered with or not tampered with, million issues. But the fact is that we have to act. And I think those of us who understand the complexity have an obligation to act, have an obligation to think, and an obligation to communicate. And that has come to us through these excellent moments of listening to these two lectures. And I want to thank them very much indeed for the extremely casual and easy way in which you put forth what are really complex issues. So a big hand and thanks to both of you for a very, very wonderful evening. I also want to thank the BIC, which has been so accommodating and so excellent in providing us the space. It's been, it encourages us to come to the BIC. We have come from Rajasthan, which is a fair distance, and the School for Democracy would particularly like to thank the BIC for providing the space, because after traveling so many miles, you want to come to a space where you can talk and talk with ease. On behalf of the Deys, the Khoslas, and the School for Democracy, I want to thank you all for being here today and for listening to this excellent conversation. I won't call it a lecture, really, it has been a conversation, and hoping that such conversations increase in number, increase in intensity, and multiply and go all over the country is a hope that I cherish. And if that hope is realized, we continue to have conversations and we continue to walk, I think things should change. So let's go back with a little bit of hope and let's speak the truth. Thank you very much. May I invite Mrs. Dey, Asha, to hand over the 2 gifts to the 2 speakers, please. And may I ask Nachiket to please help her with the gifts. You can take it there only? Yes, of course. Yes, yes, of course.
Thank you all for joining us today. Just one last announcement. Those of you who have filled your cards, please kindly hand it over to us. Thank you very much for joining us. Good night.